on those
Snake
duck
skills.
duck things, you know, quack quack. I mean, Paul. I mean, I'm sure you've heard that 100 times, right? Because I've talked to psychiatrists at the forensic unit at Colony Farms. I mean, these are the guys hired by you to look after our people that are put into the forensic unit out there. I suggested neurobiofeedback and follow this, I call this heavy-duty thing on our payroll, just dismissed it. And this is only last year. Dismissed it out of hand. It's quackery then. And yet KVOS, just a couple of weeks ago, had an hour-and-a-half program with somebody doing exactly what you're doing, not as good, I'm sure, but down in Seattle, and raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for the station by talking about what you're doing.
Yes.
So what you're doing is becoming mainstream. People are starting to, not mainstream, but it's certainly coming up to mainstream.
As you know, that's my mission. I wrote one book for the general population, and I wrote one book for primary care practitioners. And I'm working with a company in Montreal developing a turnkey system so primary care practitioners can add neurotherapy to their practices. So
Just
if somebody
like that.
comes in with depression, for example, rather than do cognitive behavior therapy for long periods of time or medicalize them with antidepressants and sedatives and so forth, you do some neurotherapy and correct the neurological predisposition to depression. Then you might do a bit of therapy, or, whatever. So that's my mission.
Because you can do a brain scan, which is really just an EEG,
That's
same kind of
exactly
thing,
what it is.
same thing that they do put on your head when you go into the hospital with a suspected stroke, and you can tell whether somebody has a predisposition to be an addictive behavior. You can tell
That's
if
the
they...
remarkable thing about neurotherapy. Those of us who have been in it for long periods of time, seeing thousands of these EEGs, we started to associate patterns. How come a guy that talks about depression, he comes in with depression, always has this profile? Well, it makes sense. All of our behaviors and symptoms are associated with brain activity. It has to be. Where else would it be? And if you can find the area of inefficiency associated with that condition, normalize it, then the symptom improves. It's really that simple. And it's not, there's nothing strange about that concept. I mean, that makes infinitely good sense. Meditators have been doing that for a millennium. That's what they do. They sit at the foot of a master and they learn how to control brain activity to create certain kind of mental states.
So people can grow out of things just because of something that they do in their life, a new interest, they can grow out of ADD?
They can grow out of the hyperactive component of it, yes. The problem with ADD is there's a neurological condition that does not change with age. Now, there are some mental exercises that you can do so that you can train yourself, train the brain to reorganize itself. What neurotherapy does is it does it much, much, much more efficiently.
And does it for you?
Well, in the early days, we used to call some of this neurotherapy technological meditation, because at the Menninger Foundation, they studied mystics and meditators and, the guys that can get themselves into these blissful states and so forth. And they looked at the brain activity associated with those states, and then what they did was they set up the neurotherapy to create that state. So what they could do was duplicate what would take a meditator 10 years to do in 10 weeks.
Amazing.
That's the difference.
What about things like shamans and integrated healing and this kind of thing? Is that sort of part of the same thing or no?
Yes. These are areas that people don't like to talk about because, somebody has healing energy, Ooh, we're all afraid of that kind of stuff. But,
There's people that can touch you and you just feel...
Look, there are physicians and there are physicians. There are physicians who you get better when you walk in the door. Okay, and there are physicians, you can sit in their waiting room forever and you still don't get better.
You have no idea how much I like hearing you say that.
Well, you know, a lot of us spend a lot of time focusing our energy on healing people. If that is your mission, then, you know, neurotherapy happens to be my vehicle. But we do a lot of other things.
I have sat in your waiting room at least 50 times, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
40 for sure, likely 50. And watching the people come in and the people leave, particularly when the kids get to go to the treasure chest and pick out their fossil or something, is just an experience.
Yes.
Because you have that same kind of, your office has that same kind of feeling. More so when you were down on Homer. Or, yeah, it's Homer you were on, wasn't it? Yeah,
Yes.
1107 Homer. That was, that with just you and Mari, because the people would come in and it just had this feeling of goodness about it. You know, it wasn't busy. It was just people would walk in and you could see them calm.
Yes.
By walking in the door. Okay, so stroke and a concussion can be the same thing or have the same results.
Traumatic brain injury, sure.
Yeah, okay, because the stroke is just the brain injury because the blood clotted and you
That's
didn't
right.
have, and
Bingo.
the concussion is, or the closed head injury is when you got knocked, so
That's right.
the same thing happens.
Well, there's an interesting difference usually. When you have a traumatic brain injury, we almost always have some problems with marked mood variation, fluctuations, and impulse control problems, and anger problems. And the reason for that is no matter how you're hit, no matter what the trajectory is, you always damage the frontal part of the brain because of the way the brain sits in the cranial vault. Okay. So even if you're hit on the back, you're going to get some...
Well, that's the theory
and
of
the frontal part of the brain, particularly the right prefrontal cortex, that's where all the regulators are sitting, the social regulators, the impulse control, mood modulation, and so forth. Now, a stroke, of course, can be somewhere else, and you can have marked mood variations with a stroke as well, but you can also have primarily motor issues, and the mood issue is depression associated with it, not damage associated with it. And those are things you can tell by doing a brain map. Okay, you know exactly where to go in the brain, what the implications are, and what you have to do to
well, this is what I like again, because I know what we're talking about tonight, but you know, somebody might have an ADD thing sitting out there. You can actually map somebody's head and tell them that they have ADD, as opposed to a school teacher saying that this particularly rambunctious. How many kids come in to see you that have been told they have ADD and don't?
A lot.
A lot.
Yes.
1 out of 5? 1 out of 10?
They always have some issue. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. And the issue may be that people can't tolerate children's behavior.
Well, kids are kids.
And there's no question in my mind but we're medicating normal children's behavior. We have places around here where 50% of male children are medicated.
Well, that was true in the school in Kelowna back in 2000.
Talk about ridiculous. If you look at any disorder in terms of a normal bell curve of what you would expect, you know, 5 kids out of 100 is a lot to have something like an attention issue. 50%?
So 20%, 50% there, that's just out of line.
Of course. I mean, people become intolerant of children's behavior. That's what it is. So the kid comes in, and, you know, we have a look at the brain activity, and we have a chat with the mother. And the one thing, you know the thing I always say to mothers?
No, I'm over here. Though.
You're the mother, you outrank everybody.
Oh, okay.
Okay? So we get mothers marching into school and letting them know what's what. Okay? Which is exactly the way it should be. In any event, typically when you get a child, there is something, you know, some minor thing. For example, male children in particular of alcoholics are very likely to have a condition that predisposes them to self-medicating behavior, like alcoholism. And what does that look like as a kid? Well, what it looks like as a kid is fidgeting, you know, moving around, and they just can't get settled, you know.